Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then just welcome. Um, I usually do things that are just something that's on my mind. Like I've done a veganism video, some social justice videos, and quite a few mental health videos. Those are all things that are important to me. So usually that's what my topics are about here. But today I thought I'm going to do something different and give you a video about one of my favorite topics, which is true crime. A few of my friends and family have suggested I do true crime videos because I know so much about them and I'm always rambling to everyone about these horrifying stories that no one actually wants to hear about. And so they suggest that I come to YouTube and share it with all of you. Just a side note, if you watched my previous video about my meltdown and everything, I am on medication, so I'm kind of like a zombie. So excuse me if I look a little bit half asleep. Also, I'm no longer allowed to drink caffeine because of my anxiety, so I'm on herbal tea, which is very yummy, but not really, this doesn't really have the same effect as an energy drink does. Anywho, that's not what this video is about, so moving on. I just want to give a quick disclaimer. Firstly, all the information that I'm going to give you in this video is just things that are compiled off the internet. It's information freely available to the public, so I've just compiled it all into one video for information purposes. And then also a trigger warning. This video is going to be a little bit heavy. There's going to be themes of child abuse, sexual abuse, a lot of graphic details. There will be no imagery, no graphic pictures or anything, but just descriptions of things like that, spousal abuse, that kind of thing. So if it's not something that you feel comfortable listening to or watching, I completely understand. You don't have to watch this video. But for those of you that are interested, I decided I'm going to try and focus on some true crime stories from South Africa, because we don't have that many YouTubers or podcasts. There are true crime podcasts and YouTubers from South Africa, but there's not a huge amount of us, and our cases are not always very well known. So I thought I'm going to also just throw a few true crime stories in between my videos every now and then. So this is officially my first one. Cheers! Okay, so the story I'm going to talk about today, some of you might know about it. I think it's more known locally in our area, but I think it was covered internationally. Anyway, it's about the Springs House of Horrors. So the reason why I decided to start with this case is it's a case that feels very close to me. Firstly, physically close to me. We used to live really close to where that house is, the House of Horrors, and it's in the same area where I work, the same town that I work in. My husband and I literally drive past that house twice a day, on the way to work every morning and on the way home every afternoon. So physically the location is really close to us, but then also emotionally, because it does revolve around child abuse and trauma. I'll maybe go into that a little bit later in the video of my own personal experience, but so these are the reasons why I thought this would be a good video to start on. Okay, so firstly, I just want to say that all the names in this case are protected. They haven't been released publicly because some of the children are still minors at the moment, so to protect their identities, the identification of the mother and the father have not technically been released. But if you look deep enough on the internet, you can find information about them, the dad's name and surname, and there are photos of him. And the only name that is publicly known is the oldest daughter. Her name is Yolandi, or Lundy as she prefers to be called, and that's mostly just because she has gone very public with her story. She's not a minor anymore. I think she's in her 20s now, and she actually wrote a book about this whole event and everything that she went through with her parents and all of that. So I think that's the only name. I'm going to refer to the parents as HE and SE, just for the sake of the video. Okay, so let's just go through the couple's background before we get into the actual case. So the mom in the story, S.E., she comes from a home where her dad passed away when she was 11, and basically after that her mom just neglected her and her siblings and just abandoned them. She ended up moving in with her sister when she was 16 years old, and then that's when she met her future husband. He was 17 at the time, H.E. She decided to drop out of school and moved in with him and his parents, but his whole household was also quite tumultuous. There was a lot of abuse in the household, abuse between his two parents. I think they abused him as well, and then in turn he started abusing his then girlfriend, eventually fiance. So I think the whole dynamic there already was not great. There was one weekend when the young newly engaged couple decided to go away together for a weekend, and while they were away they got a phone call that there had been a shooting back at home. So they rushed back to his parents' house to find that his mom had shot the dad and then shot herself. The mom didn't survive, but the dad did survive. The young couple did decide after this, however, to rather move out of the house, and they went to go and live with other relatives. Eventually they got married and in 1998 they had their first child. This is Yolandi, their daughter, and they moved around a lot. They stayed in caravan parks, they stayed in, with other people in their houses as the dad, H.E., was struggling to find a stable job. Eventually by 2010 they had 3 more children, so that's when they moved into or were living in this double-story house here in Springs. The address is 36 Plantation Road in Springs, Gauteng, where I work, close to where I work. And he was working as a second-hand car salesman, so obviously he wasn't earning an enormous income, which doesn't explain how he could afford such a massive house. But he was supplementing his income by selling drugs, and also allowing sex workers to use some of the rooms in their house to conduct business. So that's basically how he would supplement his income. Him and his wife also used drugs themselves, so mainly cat and crystal meth. These were their drugs of choice. They often used to have parties in their house at night where I don't know what dodgy people were coming to these parties, but anyway, they would be doing a ton of drugs. Everybody would be getting high, everyone would be getting drunk, and often they would end in group orgies and things like that. Unfortunately, the oldest daughter, Landi, had to witness all of these things happening because her parents were using her as a waitress, serving girl during these parties. She had to make sure everyone's alcohol was topped up the whole time, clean up any messes that were made during this time, all of that. And sometimes she would fall asleep on the staircase, and so her parents started feeding her drugs to make sure that she would stay awake to be able to work throughout the night at these parties. Now the reason why she was so tired is because the dad got to a point where he wouldn't let the mom basically out of his sight for too long, and so he would make his wife come to work with him every day so he could watch her constantly. And then Landi, who was just a young teenager at that time, preteen to teenager, had to take care of her siblings. At this point there were 4 younger siblings. Her brother H, he was 11, and then I had 3 toddler children between the ages of I think 2 to 5, something like that. And she basically raised most of her siblings from when they were born. The mom would just not care at all, so she had to start feeding the baby, changing them, bathing them, taking care of them, that kind of thing. And so that's what she would do during the day. She also tried to clean the house. Apparently the house was very filthy when law enforcement got there, but I guess she tried to do what her parents were telling her to do. She also had to do all the cooking, the family meals and dinner had to be done by the time her parents got home, that kind of thing. So the only child out of all of them whose birth was legally registered is Landi. Her birth was registered and she attended school for 3 years. Then her dad took her out of school and said she's no longer attending school. The rest of her siblings, all 4 of the other children, their births have never been registered anywhere legally. They were born in hospitals, and then somewhere between the hospital and home affairs, I guess, I don't know, but their births were just never registered and it was never questioned. Also, none of them have ever attended any schooling. They've received no education, to the point where after the parents were arrested and everything came out, the son H, who was 11 years old, he couldn't even write or spell his own name. That's how illiterate he was. So the mom told law enforcement that she had been homeschooling the children, but obviously she hadn't, because she'd been going to work with her husband every day because he was watching her. And also there was no physical evidence of homeschooling. The children were completely illiterate, so obviously that was not the case. The children were not allowed to leave the house. They had no friends, because obviously then people would start questioning why they are not attending school. And obviously, I guess, they were covered in bruises and looked unkempt, so they were literally forced to stay on the house, in the house, on the property, that kind of thing. Never allowed to leave. They had no friends, no socializing, nothing like that. So let's get to the whole big drama that happened. On the evening of the 19th of May 2014, the second oldest child, H, that's the oldest son, he managed to escape. So their dad, HE, went out to buy himself takeaways for dinner, and the son decided, this is it, I am going to escape and get help now, I'm done. I think his dad had been on his case the whole day, and like very abusive, and there was a lot of fighting, and he was just like done with it. So he ran out to the backyard and scaled the wall. His sister Lundy tried to stop him from leaving, because she was just so terrified if their dad comes back and H is gone. How was she going to explain it? Obviously her dad would fly into a fit of rage. So, but anyway, H landed in the neighbor's yard. The neighbors are Mr. and Mrs. Venter. And while he was now in their yard, Lundy ran back into the house and went and told their mom that H had just jumped over the wall into the neighbor's house. And now the mother's terrified because her husband's going to come home. Everybody's terrified. Anyway, while this is happening, H knocks on the door of the neighbor's house. They come to the door, and the first thing that he said to them was, please don't tell my father that I'm here. The neighbors were horrified when they saw the state of this child. He just had a pair of very baggy, worn out shorts on, no shirt, a lot of physical bruises, just looked generally unkempt and malnourished. And they let him in the house, and they were not sure what to do. The Mrs. Venter was so worried about phoning the police, because she was scared just now the cops come out and just take him back home. So she wasn't really sure what to do, and while she's contemplating what exactly they should do, Lundy and the mom, SE, arrived at the neighbor's house. They came next door, and the mom was begging the neighbors to just let her have her son back, and everything's fine, he's just misbehaving or something like that, trying to get but the neighbors didn't want to just let the boy go back, because there's obviously a situation, and now they can see the daughter also doesn't look very good, and the mom is visibly drugged and high most of the time, so clearly there was something wrong here. Unfortunately, at this time, the dad got back from getting his food. Somehow gathered that everyone was at the neighbor's house. He went out to the neighbor's house, literally pushed past everyone, slapped H through the face, and dragged him out of the neighbor's house, yelling about how he was going to murder his son tonight. So the Venters, the neighbors, were shocked, they had no idea what just happened, and Lundy and her mom followed the dad and the son back to the house. The son was tied to the pool table by the dad, and his face was so badly beaten that his eyes were completely swollen shut. Sorry. His sister said that his eyes looked like livers. I don't even know how. Anyway, I don't want that image, but that's basically what happened that night. First thing the next morning, so the whole night this Mrs. Venter is trying to decide if she should phone social workers, should she phone the police. She wasn't sure what to do. Eventually she phoned the police first thing in the morning, and that was it. The bomb blew. There were 17 policemen outside the house, 3 social workers. There was first a whole drama getting into the house, because there was apparently a guard stationed outside the gate for some reason. So they got into the house, and then the mom was visibly very high, and the dad had taken H, the son with the whole swollen face now, and went and hid him in a back room outside somewhere so that the cops couldn't get to him. And the other 3 children were clinging to their older sister Lundy. All the kids were sitting on this very soiled, dirty mattress. So basically the kids shared a bedroom, and they just had this one mattress. No blankets, no bedding, nothing. That's just where they all slept. And initially some of the social workers actually thought that some of the little kids belonged to Lundy because they were so attached to her, and the mother had no clear attachment to or compassion for any of the children. It only later came out that these are all actually the parents' children. So first the dad tried to pretend that he was the mother's brother that was just visiting, and then obviously it became clear this is the abusive father. He started getting very aggressive with law enforcement and the social workers. He dragged his children out into his car and locked them in the car, wouldn't let the social workers come near the car. He was threatening and aggressive. Eventually they managed to calm him down and persuade him to let the children just come with them. So the one social worker took the children. According to one of the reports, it says he drove after them, like he followed the social workers with his kids, almost basically driving her off the road because he was so angry. At this point, they didn't know where H was. So they had spoken to the neighbors, because that's obviously who had phoned the police, and they had told him about this little boy, and they can't find this little boy anywhere. The dad came up with the story that the little boy had been sent to other family or something like that because he was so misbehaved. The police at this point thought H had actually been murdered, because obviously the last comment that the dad made leaving the neighbor's house was saying he's going to murder his son tonight. So they didn't know where he was, but he was stashed in a back room in a hole in the roof or something like that. Eventually, when they got the mother and the father separated, though, the mom broke down and confessed to where the son was. They managed to find him, and then they had all the kids together. So then they started taking statements from the children. Obviously, the 3 younger ones were a little bit young to do proper statements, but the 2 older ones, Lundy, who at that time was 16, and H, who at this time was 11, were able to give proper statements. And this is when all the horrifying details came out of what they had been going through for all these years in this house. So basically, Lundy was treated as a servant in this house. She had to cook, she had to clean, she had to raise all the children, she had to serve them at all these parties happening at night. She was being drugged and given alcohol. And then also came out that her dad had been raping her and sexually abusing her for quite a while, several times. And then although she was the servant of the family, both of them said that H, the son, was for some reason the one that the dad had picked on from day one, like the most. He was very aggressive with H. The physical abuse was very intense with him. He had researched the dad had researched how to torture someone, like Googled it, and then found out about waterboarding. Then he started waterboarding Lundy and H. And sometimes he would have them sit in a cold bath and then use an electric cattle prod, like those things that they zap cows with to get them to move. He would zap his children with that while they're sitting in water to shock them. And then he would also suspend H by his hands and his feet from trains that were attached to poles, and then whip him or beat him with a cane. One time he broke a TV over H's head and split his ear open, and Lundy tried to fix the ear again with like bandages and things like that or whatever. She was always trying to take care of her siblings when they got injured and fix their bruises or medicate them and treat them however best she was able to do. And then the youngest son, he was 2 years old at the time. There was an event once where the dad basically picked him up by his feet and swung him like a baseball bat into their pool table. And then there were other events where the younger girls were dragged up the stairs by their hair, by the father obviously, and kicked like full force in their face. So he would do all of these things because in his head he was punishing them. What had happened was the dad had set up 37 surveillance cameras throughout the house and the property and everywhere, so that he could literally watch his children's every move 24/7. And then at night he would come home and review the footage, and on weekends he would review the footage of what was happening in the house during the day, and whatever his perceived wrongdoings were that the children had done during the day, he would punish them for. So all of these punishments were because of things that they had done wrong while him and his wife were at work. So all of this obviously came out now in the statements, and him and his wife were placed under arrest. But then the wife said that she had also been victim to her husband, and that's why she never did anything, because she was terrified of him herself. So during the trial, there was a clinical psychologist called Bronwyn Stollers who testified that HE can be classified as a psychopath and a sadist. And all through the trial, the children's mom did not show any affection towards them while they were doing their statements or sitting in the gallery. She didn't show any compassion or sympathy for them. In fact, there were actually several photos of her sitting next to her husband, holding his hand and supporting him. So they did later also say, the psychologist, that she was suffering from battered wife syndrome as well as Stockholm syndrome. So obviously we know this is quite common in many spousal abusive cases. Although she did eventually divorce him, and it did come out that she had also suffered from abuse at his hands. There was one time when he was chasing her through the house with a knife and eventually stabbed her in her backside, and she started bleeding and she required stitches. There was another time when he stabbed her so with such impact in her face with a pool cue that it pierced her cheek, and she had to go to a hospital, to the ER for that as well. So there were several of the children's injuries that were also so severe that they needed medical attention. It's not really clear why no one ever picked up on the fact that these injuries seemed suspicious. I don't know if they maybe went to different medical facilities or doctors all the time that no one picked it up. I don't know how they explained away the odd injuries, but anyway, it was never sent or given over to like Child Protective Services to investigate. So I'm not sure why that didn't happen. Maybe someone could have done something about it sooner. But a lot of the injuries, Landy did try and help the siblings, obviously, as I said, herself at home with trying to bandage them using first aid kits and medication that I guess the dad would bring home, and she would try and treat her younger siblings and herself from home. So during his victim impact statement, the son, H, said, and this is a quote, "I hate my dad and I wish I could have another surname because I want nothing to do with him. Me and Landy all have also decided that we want nothing to do with our mother because she never helped us or got us away from the abuse." So the dad got a 35-year sentence.
I remember the first time that the story hit headlines, it certainly sounded like some kind of horror out of a movie, really, and we've made significant progress since then. So tell us what happened in court today.
Well, Kathy, as you mentioned, the man now widely known as the Springs Monster and his now ex-wife faced more than 20 charges. So today was Judgment Day in the High Court in Pretoria, and the father of 5, was today found guilty of rape, attempted murder, child abuse, and that's just some of the charges that he was found guilty of today. So there was 22 in total.
The mom, however, just got a 5-year suspended sentence because she was also a victim in all of this, even though she didn't help her children to get out. But anyway, so she never served any jail time and wasn't sentenced to prison. She actually got remarried, and the person she married was her ex-husband's cousin, and they had a daughter together, so she's got a new child now. I don't know how that works, but anyway, she's never reached out to any of her previous children to see how they're doing. Not that they want anything to do with her anyway, but it doesn't seem like she feels very guilty or remorseful about what happened to them. All the children were separated after the trial and sent to different homes and foster care. Landy actually says that she loves her foster parents and she's so grateful that they took her in and that they've been there for her. She's the one who wrote the book about this whole experience. It's called Die Huis van Gruwels, which is Afrikaans for the House of Horrors. It's only available in Afrikaans at the moment. but she seems to be thriving and has decided that she's not going to let her past experiences dictate the rest of her life, and she wants to travel and have children, even adopt children and things like that. So obviously for her, she had somewhat of a happier ending. Her brother H, however, seems to be struggling a little bit more. He's trying to catch up on his education because obviously he had no education at all and he's completely illiterate. So I feel like he's very frustrated. He's also struggling to deal with the feelings of anger and hurt from the PSD from all the years of abuse, and obviously the physical scars that he still has. He also said someone once told him that he resembles his dad, and that made him furious. Like, obviously he doesn't want to be associated with his dad at all, so that's not something that he wanted to hear. And then the younger children are all still minors, so I think they're still in the system or in foster care at the moment. There's no information and no pictures of any of their faces, which is obviously understandable. Obviously HE started a church group in prison, so and he's turned his life around and is now a religious person, which I feel like all of them do that. Once they're in prison, suddenly they're such a good religious person after all the horrific things that they've done. But anyway, kudos to him, that's great. So obviously all of this, the house was put on back on the market and someone else bought it. He wasn't even aware of the whole events that had happened at that house, and he first wanted to turn it into a living place for college students. There's a college very close to where that house is, like in the same road. But then after he found out about the history of the house and what happened there, he changed his mind and rather turned it into a venue and a conference center and a guest house, because he said he wants it to have a positive feeling and vibe and things like that. He doesn't want any negative connotations or feelings towards that building anymore, which I guess is nice. I'm not sure if I specifically would go stay there, but it's nice that he is trying to change the whole meaning behind that house, the House of Horrors. So, just quick on the side note, personally for me, the reason why it resonated with me is obviously the child abuse thing. My sister and I were physically and mentally abused for several years growing up by one of our stepdads, and he also tried to murder my mom several times. There was also sexual abuse involved in the household. Anyway, unfortunately, my mom kept taking him back into our lives. So it was a bit unstable, our childhood. And it's taken me a long time, I guess, to resolve the feelings of anger and resentment that I hold because of these things. And obviously, I developed PTSD, and that's where my anxiety and depression and all of that comes from. So I no longer have a relationship with my mom. I cut all contact with her for my own emotional and mental well-being. So I think in that sense, although the abuse I suffered was nowhere near as bad as what these kids went through by any means, I can empathize with their situation and their feelings towards, their parents not doing enough for them. So I understand that part. I think this is one of the worst cases of child abuse that I personally know of in South Africa. Obviously, this unfortunately happens on a daily basis worldwide. This is a problem that, we face with parents, and it seems like very often lately parents murdering their own children and abusing them. I'm not sure what's happening, but anyway, it does unfortunately seem to be a very common thing that is happening. But I feel like the more awareness we spread about it and talk about it, the more people know about it, because it's important. These victims need to be remembered, like their stories need to be told, and people need to know, unfortunately, the dangers that are out there. Obviously, a lot of the times the victims are unable to come forward and talk about it because they're too scared or they feel too ashamed to talk about it, so no one knows what's going on until it's too late. That is the unfortunate reality, but there are monsters out there, so that is the unfortunate reality of the world. But that is all I have on this case from my side. You're welcome to leave comments in the bottom if you want to, if you have anything to share or any opinions about the case or anything that I said. Otherwise, until next time, bye.